Invisible genius. The Seattle rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morrison and Associates as Zoe Chun hunched over her drafting table, her worn cardigan draped loosely over narrow shoulders. The late afternoon light filtered through. Her thick-rimmed glasses, illuminating the intricate architectural sketches spread before her. She moved her pencil with practiced precision, each line deliberate and clean. Chun. Marcus Bennett's voice cut through the studio's ambient hum like a blade. These foundation calculations are completely wrong. Did you even attend engineering school? Or did you just watch some YouTube videos? Zoe's pencil paused mid-stroke. Around the open-plan office, conversations quieted as colleagues pretended not to watch the familiar scene unfold. Marcus stood behind her desk in his tailored charcoal suit, holding her structural analysis printouts with obvious disdain. The load-bearing specifications are actually correct, Zoe said quietly, not turning around. I double-checked them against the soil composition reports. Marcus scoffed, his perfectly styled dark hair catching the light as he shook his head. This is exactly why junior designers shouldn't handle complex calculations. You're better suited for coffee runs and filing. He dropped the papers on her desk with theatrical dismissal. Redo these by tomorrow morning, and this time, maybe ask Carter to check your work before wasting my time. Heat crept up Zoe's neck, but she simply nodded and began gathering the scattered papers. This was her reality. Brilliant ideas dismissed, careful work criticized, contributions invisible. For 3 years, she'd endured Marcus's daily verbal cuts while watching less qualified colleagues receive promotions and recognition. As Marcus strutted back to his corner office, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished concrete floors, Zoe caught Nina Rodriguez watching from the reception area. Her roommate had stopped by to drop off forgotten lunch, and her usually warm expression had hardened into something fierce. Nina worked as a stylist for Seattle's fashion elite, transforming ordinary people into extraordinary versions of themselves. She understood the power of perception in ways Zoe was only beginning to grasp. How long are you going to let him treat you like that? Nina asked later that evening, finding Zoe still working at their apartment's small dining table surrounded by architectural models and calculation sheets. Zoe looked up from her laptop, exhaustion evident in her brown eyes. It's not that simple, Nina. He's the lead architect on every major project. Crossing him would be career suicide. But look at this work. Nina gestured at the elegant building designs covering the table. These concepts are incredible. That sustainable housing complex could revolutionize affordable architecture. You're wasting your talent in his shadow. Zoe saved her work and closed the laptop with a sigh. Talent doesn't matter if no one sees it. Marcus makes sure of that. Nina studied her friend, the slouched posture, the oversized clothes that hid her figure, the way she seemed to shrink into herself after each workday. What if they could see it? What if they saw you? I don't understand. The annual summer gala is in 6 weeks. Every major developer in the city will be there, including some who might appreciate fresh ideas over stale egos. Nina's eyes sparkled with possibility. What if you presented your own project? Zoe shook her head immediately. I can't. Junior designers don't present at the gala. Only senior architects get that privilege. Says who? The invitation mentions open submissions for innovative concepts. Nina pulled out her phone, scrolling through the firm's newsletter. Right here, we encourage all team members to contribute their visionary ideas. For a moment, hope flickered in Zoe's chest before reality crashed back. Even if I could present, they'd never take me seriously. Look at me, Nina. I'm practically invisible. Nina stood and walked to the window, watching. The city lights twinkled beyond the rain-streaked glass. Then maybe it's time to become visible. Seeds of change. The transformation began subtly, like morning light gradually chasing away shadows. Nina had convinced Zoe to start small, better-fitting clothes that complemented her petite frame, contact lenses to replace the thick glasses, and a few strategic highlights that brought warmth to her straight black hair. But the real change was happening from within. Your posture tells a story before you even speak, Nina explained during their weekend shopping trip to Pike Place Market. Right now, you're apologizing for existing. We need to change that narrative. Zoe caught her reflection in a boutique window and barely recognized herself. The tailored navy blazer and well-fitted dark jeans revealed a figure she'd hidden for years. Her hair, now shoulder-length with subtle caramel streaks, framed her face in a way that emphasized her delicate features rather than hiding them. "Feel like I'm wearing a costume," Zoe admitted, adjusting the blazer's lapels nervously. "You're not wearing a costume. You're finally wearing clothes that fit who you actually are," Nina corrected gently. "The shy, apologetic version isn't the real you. It's just who you became to survive Marcus's bullying." Back at Morrison and Associates on Monday morning, the changes were subtle enough that most colleagues didn't consciously notice, but Zoe felt different. She walked straighter, spoke more clearly, and for the first time in months, didn't automatically defer when Marcus made his usual rounds of criticism. "These window specifications look adequate," Marcus said, reviewing her latest drawings with his typical condescension. "Though I suppose even basic competence is improvement for you." Instead of shrinking, Zoe looked directly at him. "Actually, they're more than adequate. The triple pane design reduces energy consumption by 30% while maintaining structural integrity. I've included cost analysis and environmental impact projections." Marcus blinked, clearly taken aback by her confident response. For a moment, he seemed to really see her, the way her new contacts revealed striking brown eyes, how the fitted blouse suggested intelligence rather than invisibility. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by his familiar smirk. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Chun. Pretty clothes don't make you an architect." That evening, Zoe spread her secret project across the apartment floor. The sustainable housing complex had evolved far beyond her original concept. Using innovative materials and design principles, she'd created something revolutionary, affordable housing that didn't sacrifice beauty or environmental responsibility. Each unit was designed to maximize natural light and airflow while incorporating vertical gardens and renewable energy systems. "This is extraordinary," Nina breathed, studying the detailed models and renderings. "You're not just designing buildings, you're reimagining how people live." "The presentation is in 3 weeks," Zoe said, her voice mixing excitement with terror. "James Morrison himself will be evaluating submissions. If he likes it, I could present to the entire gala. And if Marcus finds out you're going around." "Him?" Zoe's hands trembled slightly as she arranged the architectural drawings. "Then my career at Morrison and Associates is over. But if I don't try, I'll spend the rest of my life being invisible." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of clandestine preparation. Zoe worked on her presentation during lunch breaks and stayed late after Marcus left, refining every detail. She practiced her pitch in front of Nina's mirror, learning to project her voice and make eye contact with imaginary board members. Meanwhile, Nina orchestrated the final stages of Zoe's transformation. They found the perfect dress for the gala, a flowing sage green piece that suggested confidence without ostentation. The color complemented Zoe's newly highlighted hair and brought out the golden flecks in her eyes. "Remember, you're not trying to become someone else," Nina reminded her during a final practice session. "You're becoming who you always were underneath. All that hiding." On the Friday before the gala, Zoe submitted her proposal to James Morrison's office. Her hands shook as she placed the bound presentation on his assistant's desk, knowing there was no turning back. The project that had consumed her evenings and weekends, Her vision for the future of sustainable housing was now beyond her control. Walking back to her desk, she passed Marcus's office and caught him watching her through the glass walls. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and something else she couldn't identify. For 3 years, she'd been invisible to him, except as a target for criticism. But lately, she'd noticed his glances lingering longer, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't realize existed. Carter Webb approached her workstation that afternoon, his usual competitive swagger replaced by genuine interest. "I heard through the grapevine that you submitted something for the gala presentation. That's bold, Chun." "It felt like the right time," Zoe replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Well, for what it's worth, I think it's about time someone shook things up around here." Carter glanced toward Marcus's office. Not everyone appreciates talent when it's right in front of them. As the weekend approached, Zoe felt the familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with something new, anticipation. In 3 days, she would either cement her invisibility forever or step into a light she'd never imagined possible. The unveiling. The Morrison and Associates rooftop terrace sparkled under string lights and the warm glow of Seattle's summer sunset. The annual gala had transformed the usually sterile office building into an elegant gathering space where the city's architectural elite mingled with champagne glasses and ambitious conversations. The Space Needle gleamed in the distance, a testament to bold vision made manifest. Zoe stood in the building's marble lobby, her reflection multiplied in the polished surfaces around her. The sage green dress Nina had chosen moved like water. Around her figure, its flowing fabric suggesting both strength and grace. Her hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the contact lenses revealed eyes that seemed larger, more luminous than anyone had noticed before. "You look beautiful," Nina whispered, adjusting Zoe's delicate silver necklace. "But more importantly, you look like yourself." Taking the elevator to the roof felt like ascending to another world. When the doors opened, Zoe stepped into a scene of sophisticated networking and careful power plays. Developers in expensive suits clustered around architectural models, while established firms showcased their latest projects on illuminated displays. Reaction was immediate and electric. Conversations paused mid-sentence as heads turned to follow her movement across the terrace. James Morrison, distinguished in his silver hair and navy blazer, actually stopped talking to look. Even Carter Webb, who had barely acknowledged her existence before this week, approached with obvious admiration. "Zoe? You look ... double quotes." Carter struggled for words. "Incredible. I almost didn't recognize you." But it was Marcus's reaction that truly captured the evening's transformation. He stood near the bar with several senior partners, his usual confident posture faltering as his eyes tracked Zoe's entrance. The champagne flute in his hand remained frozen halfway to his lips, and for perhaps the first time in his professional life, Marcus Bennett appeared genuinely speechless. "Holy shit," she heard him whisper to Carter later, apparently forgetting his usual polished vocabulary. "That's really Chun?" The evening's presentations began at 8 o'clock. Established architects showcased gleaming commercial towers and luxury developments while Zoe waited in the designated presentation area, her heart hammering against her ribs. When James Morrison called her name, a ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. "Our next presenter is Zoe Chun from our design team, presenting Harmony Heights, Sustainable Community Living." Zoe walked to the center of the terrace with measured steps, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Traditional affordable. Housing has failed our communities by prioritizing cost over quality of life. What if we could create homes that nurture both people and planet?" Her presentation unfolded like a revelation. Using a wireless remote, she guided the audience through her revolutionary design, modular housing units that incorporated vertical gardens, solar collection, and rainwater systems. Each building was designed to foster community interaction while maintaining individual privacy, with shared spaces that encouraged connection and collaboration. The cost per unit is 30% lower than comparable developments, while environmental impact drops by 60%, Zoe explained, her confidence growing with each slide. More importantly, resident satisfaction surveys from similar European projects show dramatically improved mental health and community engagement. The crowd was captivated. Developers leaned forward, taking notes. Environmental advocates nodded approvingly. Even the most skeptical architects seemed intrigued by her innovative approaches to space utilization and sustainable materials. Marcus stood frozen at the terrace's edge, watching this transformed version of the woman he'd dismissed daily for 3 years. This wasn't the nervous, apologetic assistant who accepted his criticism without question. This was someone entirely different, poised, brilliant, and undeniably compelling. The question isn't whether we can afford to build sustainably, Zoe concluded, her eyes sweeping across the assembled crowd. The question is whether we can afford not to. Our cities are growing, our climate is changing, and our communities are fragmenting. Architecture has the power to address all 3 challenges simultaneously. The applause was thunderous. James Morrison stood immediately, leading what became a sustained ovation that echoed across the Seattle skyline. Several developers approached. Before Zoe even left the presentation area, business cards appearing like magic. This is exactly the kind of visionary thinking our industry needs, Morrison announced, his voice carrying clearly across the terrace. Ms. Chun, I'd like to discuss making this project a Morrison & Associates flagship development. The evening became a blur of congratulations and business discussions. Zoe found herself at the center of conversations she'd only observed from the periphery, fielding questions about implementation timelines and partnership opportunities. Her ideas, the concepts she'd developed in secret evening sessions, were being treated with the respect and excitement they deserved. Marcus finally approached near midnight, as the crowd began to thin and the string lights created intimate pools of golden light across the terrace. He looked different somehow, smaller, less certain than the commanding presence who had dominated her daily experience for 3 years. Zoe, he said, her name sounding strange in his voice without the usual condescension. That presentation was. I had no idea you were capable of something like that. She turned to face him fully, noting how his expensive suit suddenly seemed less impressive, his carefully styled confidence less convincing. I've always been capable of it, Marcus. You just never bothered to look. The words hung between them. In the warm evening air, carrying the weight of 3 years of dismissed potential and overlooked brilliance. For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus Bennett had no clever comeback, no cutting remark to re-establish his dominance. I think, Zoe said gently, we need to have a very different conversation about how this firm operates. As the gala wound down in Seattle sparkled below them, Zoe realized the transformation was complete. She was no longer invisible, no longer apologizing for her existence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she had finally stepped into this light she was always meant to occupy. Shifting foundations. The Monday morning after the gala arrived with an awkward tension that permeated every corner of Morrison & Associates. Zoe walked through the office doors to find clusters of colleagues whispering excitedly about her presentation, while others cast curious glances at both her and Marcus. The power dynamic that had defined their relationship for 3 years had shifted overnight, leaving both of them navigating unfamiliar territory. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, his usual punctuality apparently another casualty of the weekends. Revelations. He moved through the office with uncharacteristic hesitancy, his confident stride replaced by something more measured and uncertain. When he reached his corner office, he paused at the glass wall, watching Zoe work at her drafting. table with an expression of confused fascination. "Bennett, my office. Now." James Morrison's voice cut through the morning routine like a blade. The founding partner stood in his doorway, his silver hair catching the light and his expression unreadable. Marcus disappeared into Morrison's office, while the rest of the team pretended not to strain their ears toward the muffled conversation behind closed doors. Zoe tried to focus on her current project, a commercial renovation that suddenly felt mundane after the excitement of her sustainable housing vision, but found herself glancing repeatedly toward the executive suite. 30 minutes later, Marcus emerged looking pale and shaken. Morrison followed, his voice carrying clearly across the open floor plan. "Effective immediately, Miss Chun will be leading the Harmony Heights project as our newest senior architect. Mr. Bennett, you'll be transitioning your current workload to support this development." The announcement sent ripples of shock through the office. In Morrison and Associates' 15-year history, no one had ever jumped from junior designer to senior architect in a single weekend. Carter Webb actually dropped his coffee mug, the ceramic shattering against the polished concrete floor. Marcus approached Zoe's desk like a man walking to his execution. His usually perfect appearance seemed disheveled, tie slightly askew, hair less precisely styled, eyes holding a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Congratulations," he said quietly, the words seeming to stick in his throat. "Morrison wants us to discuss project logistics this afternoon." "Thank you," Zoe replied, her voice neutral but not unkind. She studied his face, noting the way his jaw tightened with what appeared to be genuine discomfort. "Marcus, we should probably talk about how this is going to work." He nodded stiffly and retreated to his office, where Zoe could see him staring blankly at his computer screen through the glass walls. The man who had spent 3 years undermining her confidence now seemed lost in a world where his assumptions no longer held true. The afternoon meeting took place in Morrison's conference room, with its panoramic view of Elliott Bay and carefully curated architectural photography. Zoe arrived with detailed project timelines and budget projections, her preparation evident in the organized folders and digital presentations she'd compiled over the weekend. Marcus entered 5 minutes late, carrying only a legal pad and wearing an expression of barely concealed anxiety. For the first time in their professional relationship, he was the unprepared one. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said suddenly, interrupting Morrison's discussion of zoning requirements. The words seemed to surprise him as much as anyone else in the room. I haven't treated you fairly or professionally." Morrison raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, apparently content to let this long overdue conversation unfold. Zoe set down her pen and regarded Marcus with measured attention. "You've called me incompetent, invisible, and inadequate for 3 years," she said calmly. "You've dismissed my ideas without consideration and undermined my confidence at every opportunity. An apology is a start, but it doesn't erase the damage." Marcus winced, his expensive shirt suddenly seeming like armor that offered no protection. I know I can't fix 3 years of being an arrogant ass with a few words. But I want to try." "Why?" Zoe asked directly. "Because Morrison told you to, or because you actually see me differently now?" The question hung in the air while Marcus struggled with an answer. His hands fidgeted with his Mont Blanc pen, and she could see him wrestling with concepts his ego had never been forced to confront. "Both," he admitted finally. "God, that makes me sound terrible, doesn't it? But it's honest. Morrison's mandate forced me to examine my behavior, but Saturday night, seeing you command that room, present ideas that brilliant, I realized I've been blind to your abilities because I was threatened by them." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Self-awareness is the first step toward growth, Bennett. The question is whether you can translate that awareness into changed behavior." Over the following weeks, Marcus attempted what appeared to be genuine transformation. He began asking for Zoe's input during project meetings, credit her contributions publicly, and even defended her ideas when other senior architects expressed skepticism. But his efforts felt forced, performative, as if he was following a script rather than experiencing authentic change. "He's trying," Nina observed during one of their evening walks through Capitol Hill. "But it feels like he's trying to impress you rather than respect you." "Exactly," Zoe agreed, adjusting her lightweight cardigan against the evening breeze. "He keeps looking at me like I'm some fascinating puzzle he needs to solve, rather than a colleague he needs to work with." The breaking point came during a client presentation for the Harmony Heights project. Marcus, attempting to demonstrate his new collaborative approach, kept deferring to Zoe so obviously that the developers became confused about who was actually leading the project. "Marcus, stop," Zoe said quietly during a break in the presentation. "You're overcompensating. Just be yourself, but the better version." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "I don't know how to do that. I've spent so long being the arrogant architect that I don't know who I am without the attitude." For the first time since the gala, Zoe felt a flicker of genuine sympathy for him. Then maybe it's time to figure that out. Not because Morrison ordered you to, and not because you want to impress me. Because you want to be someone worth respecting. That evening, Marcus sent Zoe a simple email. "Thank you for your patience. I'm going to take some time to work on becoming the colleague you deserve, rather than the one I think you want." The message surprised her with its honesty and lack of performative charm. Perhaps, she thought, there was hope for authentic change after all. Blueprint for tomorrow. 3 months later, autumn had painted Seattle in shades of amber and crimson, and the dynamics at Morrison and Associates had settled into something entirely new. The Harmony Heights project was moving forward with unprecedented community support and investor interest, while Zoe had grown comfortable in her role as senior architect. But the most significant change was the quiet evolution happening between her and Marcus. The transformation hadn't been dramatic or romantic. Instead, it unfolded like good architecture itself, thoughtfully, with attention to foundation and structure rather than flashy facade. Marcus had indeed taken time to examine who he was beneath the arrogant exterior, often working late into the evening not on projects, but on what appeared to be personal reflection. "I've been thinking about what you said," Marcus told her one rainy Thursday evening as most of the office had emptied. He stood beside her drafting table where she was reviewing contractor proposals, his usual commanding presence replaced by something more genuine, about becoming someone worth respecting. Zoe looked up from her papers, noting how different he seemed in the soft lighting of the nearly empty office. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking less like the polished executive who had tormented her and more like someone she might actually want to know. "And what did you discover?" she asked, genuinely curious. Marcus pulled up a chair, not standing over her as he used to, but sitting at her level. "That I built my entire professional identity around being better than everyone else, because I was terrified of being ordinary. Every time I put someone down, I was trying to prove my own worth." "That's quite an insight," Zoe said, setting down her red pen. "What are you going to do with it?" "I started seeing a therapist," he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. "Dr. Patricia Kim. She specializes in workplace behavior and narcissistic tendencies. Turns out I had some things to work through." The honesty surprised Zoe. The Marcus she'd known for 3 years would never have admitted to needing professional help, much less discussed it openly. "How is that going?" "Humbling," he laughed, but it was a different sound than his old condescending chuckle. "She made me write letters to everyone I'd treated poorly over the years. I have a stack of them at home that I'll probably never send, but writing them helped me understand the damage I'd done." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Zoe reviewing contracts, while Marcus sketched preliminary designs for a new affordable housing project. The rain drummed against the windows, creating an intimate cocoon around their workspace. When Zoe finally gathered her papers to leave, Marcus stood as well. "Would you like to grab dinner?" he asked, then quickly added, "Not as a date or anything. Presumptuous. Just as colleagues who have somehow become friends?" Zoe considered the invitation. Over the past months, she'd watched Marcus struggle with genuine self-improvement, support her leadership of the Harmony Heights project without seeking credit, and gradually reveal glimpses of the person he might have been all along, the arrogant architect was still there, but tempered by humility and genuine effort to change. "There's a Vietnamese place on Pine Street that makes excellent pho," she said. "Perfect for a rainy evening." Walking through Capitol Hill together felt surreal. After years of workplace tension, Marcus had ditched his usual expensive restaurants for the small, family-owned establishment Zoe suggested. They sat across from each other in a cramped booth, steam rising from their bowls of soup, talking about architecture and travel and books. Conversations that revealed depths neither had suspected in the other. "I have a confession," Marcus said as they walked back toward the parking garage. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. "I kept one of those letters I wrote, the one to you." "Oh?" Zoe pulled her coat tighter against the cool evening air. "Would you like to read it sometime?" "Not now, but when you're ready. It explains things I'm still learning how to say out loud." Zoe nodded, touched by the gesture. "I'd like that." 6 weeks later, on a crisp December morning, they stood together on the construction site where Harmony Heights was beginning to take shape. The first foundations had been poured, and the skeleton of Zoe's revolutionary design was emerging from the earth like a promise kept. Marcus had become her strongest advocate and most trusted collaborator. Their working relationship built on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. "The city council is already asking about replicating this model in other neighborhoods," Marcus reported, his breath creating small clouds in the cold air. "You've started something revolutionary, Zoe." She smiled, watching construction workers pour concrete with practiced precision. "We've started something. This wouldn't have happened without your support these past months." "I'm just trying to be the colleague you always deserved," Marcus replied. "Someone who builds up rather than tears down." As they walked back toward his car, Zoe reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The shy, overlooked designer and the arrogant executive had both evolved into something better, not just individually, but together. Their relationship had grown from antagonism through awkward reconciliation into genuine partnership, and perhaps something deeper. "Marcus," she said as they reached the parking lot, "I read your letter last night." He stopped walking, suddenly tense. "And thank you for your honesty. About everything. The apology, the explanation, the commitment to change." She turned to face him fully. "But mostly, thank you for becoming someone I can trust." They stood together in the morning light, no longer the invisible assistant and her cruel boss, but two architects building something meaningful, both in concrete and steel, and in the careful construction of mutual respect. The future stretched before them like a blueprint waiting to be built, full of possibility and grounded in the strongest foundation of all, genuine understanding. Between equals, the story ended not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the quiet satisfaction of work well done and relationships carefully rebuilt. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen not in a moment of revelation, but in the patient daily choice to become worthy of the trust others place in us.